Hey, what's up, guys? So today I'm interviewing the Movement Culture, a team from Toronto, Canada. This is actually Jason Zhang, and there's another gentleman, John Koo. So we're going to be talking about, again, mobility and how it will affect your training and how it will possibly improve your training for jiu-jitsu, which is what all of us want because we love our sport. And hopefully this coronavirus kind of ends quickly so that way we can all get back to training. So introduce yourself, Jason.
Yeah, so my name is Jason, and I'm a co-founder at Movement Culture, just like Harold mentioned. We're a mobility-based company. We're in our company, we actually have three concepts that we believe in. First thing first, mobility, and then functionality, and then performance. So performance is the ultimate goal in jiu-jitsu. But before that, we got to look at the mobility and the functional side of each joint and each muscle group before actually performing complex movements. And I'm sure
So let's back that up again. Like explain what explain what mobility is, and then explain like how then mobility then kind of directs what function is, and then how the two of them directs actual performance.
Okay. So what is mobility? A lot of times I feel like with the general pop, we mix mobility and flexibility in terms of the terminology usage. Mobility is a combination of, I would say, strength and flexibility. So what that means is you're strong in certain movements, but at the same time, you're still mobile, if that makes sense.
Okay.
Right? So you can be a really strong guy, but let's say you don't have mobility, then you're just not mobile, right? So that ultimately leads to functionality, which is how healthy your body is function, how healthy your joint, muscle can function in certain movements. So in terms of, let's say, jiu-jitsu, when you're going to, your headlocks, when you're going to the takedowns, are you able to get into the functionality of going to that squat? Getting down low, how's your joints in terms of functionality, right? And then lastly, performance. So when you have mobility, functionality, and then you can look at ultimately performance. Performance is how I look at performance as the pinnacle of training. How well can you perform? Can you perform at 100%? Some of the greatest athletes, they're able to go from 100% to 1% within about 0.1 seconds, and then back up to 100% in that 0.1 second time frame again.
Right. I mean, that's also like a recovery facet as well. What I feel like the general pop and even a lot of the jiu-jitsu guys is they skip the mobility and the function and they go right to the performance, and then they're like, oh well, I'm able to perform good. But then what ends up happening, at least from my experience with a lot of like I wouldn't say older athletes, but like already been in their career or they've been training a while, that's when the problems start like popping up. So yeah, they were able to perform at that high level, and they I wouldn't say forced, but they put the body in a position to where it had no other option other than to make that performance. And then it adapted, and then that adaptation then causes injury or aches and pains that they could have avoided if they had just started with the mobility first, then work on the function, and then go to that high level performance. And then not only will you get like less aches and pains, but you also might be able to marginally increase your actual performance. At least that's like from my experience where you run into like you see that now, even with like bodybuilders, power lifters, it's like, yeah, you may have been able to do that stuff, but if you had done some of the pre-work, then you wouldn't be like destroyed by the time that you're like 30. Because you see that a lot where like, real high level athletes that don't do like the prep work, that by the time they're like, in their late 20s or even early 30s, it's like they can barely walk to their car. And that's something that we want to like kind of, I would assume all of us want to avoid. Or am I wrong?
Yeah. Ultimately, I think it comes back to physical longevity, right? So it comes back to how healthy your body, your joints, your muscles, etc. is, or even just mental capacity. There's one thing, that's a talk for another day, mental capacity, how much mental capacity you can handle, right? Because we know that, in terms of performance, there's going to be a lot of neuron receptors that's going to be hitting you. So there's going to be times where we got to dial down, right? I myself, I'm not a BJJ specialist, but, in terms of performance, it ultimately comes down to moderation and balance. And then like you say, it comes down to breaking the body eventually, when people get older. And then people got to understand, what about when you're 40, 50, 60, right? I myself, I've trained, in Canada at least, we have a lot of ex-hockey players. Okay. So I train a lot of ex-hockey players, and we talk about, some of them are still immensely at 50, year 50. So a lot of time when I train younger athletes, I ask them like, how long do you want to continue playing your sport? That's one question I'm going to ask us. At what level? That's an important question. Right? Yeah. For the longest time, if you look at sports at any level, at the highest level, I understand, you get people at professional level, they get paid to perform. Yes. But we're still human. End of the day, you're still a father, a son, a husband, right? You still got that life balance you still got to take care of. So ultimately, and then, so a lot of it, I started looking at it, as I was turning older now, I'm about turning 30 this year. They worked out to 16, is the mental health. What are you going to do when your favorite thing in the world is not there?
Yeah, all of us experience it now, man. All of us are like, the jiu-jitsu community right now is going nuts, because it's like we're in a sport that we're like on top of each other. So it's like for us, like the whole germ and whatever doesn't really, like, we really don't care. You know what I mean? It's not like we're like, we'll be sweating and we're like in the locker room. It's kind of like, it's, to be honest with you, the people that don't do jiu-jitsu, it's kind of gross. But now we're in that, like, we've gone, 2.5 months now without jiu-jitsu, and people are going like bananas, because it's like, even the recreational jiu-jitsu person is doing it like 2 to 5 times a week. The athlete is doing it 7 days a week, 2 times a day, most likely. So it's like everyone doesn't understand what they do. And that really does, like you said, it really does affect like the mentality of how to actually train. What kind of drew you to the whole mobility thing though? Like what, like you, it sounds like you've been doing fitness for a while, but like what kind of drew you into like learning how to do mobility?
Into mobility,
and then actually becoming like a full-fledged teacher of it.
Yeah. So a little bit about myself personally. Since I was 16, actually, you know what? I can relate with all the sweaty stuff. I started off with wrestling in high school. The 2 years of wrestling. You're going to, you get your hands on, you're going to awkward positions. I get it with the sweat and grind, the smell of the mat, So yeah, I started off with powerlifting. So with the same thing with jiu-jitsu players, so athletes, you guys probably are always about that performance, that 1 minute, 2 minute bouts. So anything, you're going to look into anything that is, that gets you more powerful, more faster, more stronger. And then we get so consumed by performance that we forget about recovery a lot of times, right? Because there's only so much time. And there's always this mentality of, if I'm not practicing, then the guy beside me is going to get better. I know that was LeBron's mentality when he was in high school, was that if he's not practicing, there's always a guy who's practicing hard in the gym, right? Anyway, for myself, I got into mobility because I was so sick and tired of being in pain all the time. And then when I picked up clients, 2014, when I first became a personal trainer, I remember I was always asking my clients, I'm like, do you want to be skinny and weak or skinny and strong? Right. So that's the question I'm gonna ask yourself. And then there's another question we're gonna ask yourself is, what's the point of performing well if you're always in pain? Right, versus performing well and recovering well and not always in pain.
That ties back in a little bit to what you were saying previously. Like pain is like a conversation, And if your performance is, you got to dedicate 100% of your conversation to the performance, and you have this background noise of pain there lingering, that pain is it's gonna mess with your performance. So why not deal with that? That's the thing that I never get. Like, it's like, why are you gonna try to, like, there's no mental toughness in enduring the discomfort when there's ways that you can make the discomfort go away. Like, I never understood that. Like, I run into some of the jiu-jitsu guys that I kind of train with that I'm like, dude, you shouldn't, unless it's like an acute injury, you shouldn't have like pain on a daily basis. Like, if you have pain on a daily basis, you need to adjust something. Something's not right. I don't know what that may be, but something's not right. You need to adjust something. Now, obviously that's different if it's an acute pain. Someone drops you on your head, you pull a muscle in your neck, or you herniate a disc, totally different. The pain associated with that is understandable because there's an actual contact injury. But outside of that, like, I never understood it. And it's like really hard. Like, I talk to some of the athletes and they're kind of like stubborn about it. Like, oh yeah. And I'm like, dude, like, why are you torturing yourself? It doesn't make any sense to me.
I think for that aspect, it comes back to goal setting. Come back to why are you doing jiu-jitsu? What's in it for you? How much are you willing to sacrifice? Right? That's one question that I feel a lot of people don't ask ourselves. Is like, well, same thing when I'm working with a lot of clients, if they're looking to lose 30, 40 pounds, looking to get healthier, and I'm asking them, like, well, how much are you willing to sacrifice? What is your ultimate goal, and what are you willing to sacrifice? Right? And then down the road, 10 years, 20 years, because we got to start asking ourselves that question. If you want to, play jiu-jitsu for the next however long you want to play, do you want to play a good 3 years and then potentially injure yourself and never play again? Right? Then like I'm an avid LeBron fan, as much as you would like or dislike him. But to me, the guy's smart, and the guy knows how to take care of his body. If you look at some of the top athletes, it's because they take care of themselves.
Well, I'm not a basketball guy, so I don't know anything about LeBron. So explain.
Let's talk about. Well, first of all, the amount of let's talk about the finance. A lot of times people say, they invest a lot of finance into recovery.
Right.
But let's just talk about the time. Right. He surrounded himself with great people. Invest time. So whether it's whether it's what's the thing? Whether it's icing, sorry, I'm just lost of thought right now. But any sort of recovery work, nutrition, recovery, foam rolling, mobility work, right? You have to do as much as you're doing in terms of performance. I always ask people, if you're performing 10, 20 hours a week, how much time are you investing into recovery?
That's a good way of looking at it. Yeah. So you gotta
right.
Like, and then I wonder what a good ratio would be. In other words, like an hour for an hour, is it an hour for 30 minutes? Like, how do you, then I guess that boils down to like the individual person and the amount of, I guess, I wouldn't say commitment, but the amount of intensity that they're having when they're training. I'm assuming that would make a difference. In other words, if you're doing 10 hours and you're half-assing your workouts, then you may only need like maybe 1 or 2 hours of recovery. But if you're going 10 hours and you're going 150% those 10 hours, well, then you're gonna have to up your recovery, whatever that version of your recovery looks like. And obviously it's sports specific, so not just talking about like jiu-jitsu people, but and it also depends, I guess, individual specific as well, because there's some people that are more limber, there's some people that aren't, some people that have tight shoulders, some people have spine issues. It also depends on like what other activities that I guess the individual does outside of the sport, because the sport may have like certain patterns that I think would that your body would have to adapt. And then on top of that, you have your day-to-day life, like you said, like we were saying earlier, like the husband and the wife and the kids and all that stuff. And you may do like daily activities that also exacerbates the lack of recovery. It's another form of activity, even though you call it daily life. but your daily life is also an activity. You still got to walk to your car. You still got to run around, chase your kids. Those are activities, you know, and it's like, that's where people don't, like, I never thought about that. Like, people don't approach it like, if I'm doing 10 hours of activity, whatever that activity is, like how much additional time do I need to allocate for recovery? Because, and then it allows me to go the next week, 10 hours again at the same intensity. And then again and again and again and again and again and again. And then that's where the curve increases, where you're not only improving skill-wise, but you're also improving skill as well. Yeah, I never thought of it that way. That's a good way of thinking about it. How do you think the FRC method is going to help most athletes outside of jiu-jitsu, even though I know for a fact that FRC is going to help the average jiu-jitsu player? But what's your opinion on like any athlete, any sport? It could be cycling, biking, lifting, whatever it is. How do you think it benefits the average individual that does some type of sport?
So I think you being an FRC, MS practitioner, and myself as well, I think we both can agree that the motto of FRC is to help you get better at anything you do. That's how personable it is. So if you're a rock climber, surfer, jiu-jitsu, basketball player, hockey player, right? It's very personable to you depending on the joint of interest, if that makes any sense. So, well, first of all, FRC comes with a assessment. And in that assessment, we go through each joint, how functional your joint is. We got to start thinking of a body as a team. And your joint is a member of the team. And the question I'm going to ask now is each joint healthy to perform the action your body needs to perform? Right? Yeah, so I know for jiu-jitsu, for example, a couple of joint of interest would be obviously ankle joint, knee joint, hip joint, pretty much almost everything actually, because you're just going in and using the whole body, right? But I know ankle is definitely very important when, where the wrist, when people are putting in an arm bar, or I'm not sure about the terminologies here, with in the leg lock.
So yeah, I kind of like that. So it's more like you got to think of your body as like the performance team, and each individual joint is a member of that performance team. So you got to kind of like, depending on your team, which is basically your body, depends on which member of the team, which joint you need to pay attention to, help that joint so that the whole team itself can work efficiently. I never thought of it that way. That's a good way of thinking of it too.
Yeah.
So my biggest thing is that with how do we change the mentality of like the athlete to understand that recovery is just as vital as the actual activity? Because it goes back to what you were saying with our wife and the kid and all that other stuff, is I only have X amount of time throughout my week. Unless you're like a full-blown athlete, that's a different story. But if for the average Joe that says, okay, I do this because I love this sport, but I also have a life and I have a career. So how would you, because they got to value it. They go, okay, well, I can only allocate, let's say 5 hours a week or whatever it may be. And I'd rather do the 5 hours of straight jiu-jitsu than to do 2 hours of jiu-jitsu, 2 hours of recovery, and then 1 hour, 1 hour of either or, depending on how the week went. Like I'm having difficulties kind of like relaying that message, because only just now, even though it's not the best for them, but it's kind of better for them, yoga has now gained some traction in the jiu-jitsu community, which is great, because one of the black belts, he's actually in Europe, created like a whole yoga program for it. So he basically created like which I'm actually one of his teachers as well. He created a yoga program that's geared towards jiu-jitsu people. Very effective. So it's flexibility, but not really. It's kind of a workout, but not really. So he did a really good job of like taking like the basic principles of yoga, and then kind of like designed a program that's kind of geared towards jiu-jitsu people. but only just now is that getting there. So I don't know how to tell people like, hey man, or how to relay the message to like, you need to like value recovery just as much as the actual sport. So how, in other words, if you were talking to, let's say you're hockey players, let's say you just, the one hockey player that you train, he's like, hey, I'd like for you to go talk to my team. And you have to then talk to the team of hockey players. How are you going to present it to them to say, hey, listen, this is just as important as the other? Does that make sense? Like, how would you?
Yeah, for sure. This is something I learned from my one of my business clients. He's been in business for 40 years, and one thing he does is he reads a lot of biography, and then he'll read probably like one a week or something on successful people. So I think that's something that we can also take away is to look at some of the top athletes and what do they do, and why are they successful? Like, what do they do for recovery? You know, you have to empower yourself by learning recovery just as much as performance. Because you know, going through university and over my years, I always tell people, it's not, a lot of times it's not about how hard you work. It's about how hard you can recover, right? How fast you can get back in the gym, how you feeling the next day, et cetera, et cetera. So so yeah, look at what the professionals do. What kind of recovery method they use, what system they use. Look into it. Try it out yourself. Try different things. I can't say for the general population because it's different for everybody, right? We're all built differently. Physiologically, me, you, and anyone else, we're different. We have different capacities, and yeah, so we have to know your strengths and weaknesses and build on that. So it's a very general statement there, but.
So yeah. What would you recommend for someone that wants to start implementing like a recovery program with their already existing sport? Like, where do they start?
A few things I would say is talk with your friends, see what your friends do. Obviously make sure your friends are actually good at what they do though. So who you talk to is actually very important, right? And then secondly, this is bias here. I recommend FRC Kin Stretch. This is what I do. It is what I believe in. And the reason why is because it's heavily backed up by science. And if you were to look into it, just simply search up kinstretch.com. You're going to see a lot of major sports using it. NBA, NHL, MLS, NFL. A lot of major teams are actually using Kin Stretch as their choice of recovery. And the only reason because Kin Stretch in a way and FRC in a way is not just about recovery, it's also about performance. In a way, it's also strength training your joint at end range, which is perfect for jiu-jitsu because you're always at end range. So we're going to take you into end range, into isometrics, and perform at 100% potentially, depending on the individual, right? So so that is my choice, and that's definitely something that everyone can look into. And this, when I was searching for a mobility system, when I found FRC, I was like, this is perfect. I'm also a fascial stretch therapist. That's more manual. Well, FRC is more independent, right? So it's one of the only systems out there where it's systematic, where you can actually do it on your own without a coach. Give yourself homework, do it. We have something a daily routine to where we take the joint over each joint into end range. We call it CARS, control articular rotation, which helps with the maintenance of the joint. So there's a lot, there's the maintenance, there's the health, there's the improvement, and all that stuff. Yeah. So a lot to think about, a lot to digest, but I'll say obviously start digging into it. And yeah, just ask yourself, does this work? Who's using it? Who testimonials, right? But definitely look into Kin Stretch, FRC. Hiro here, I'm sure can also talk more about FRCMS.
Yeah. I mean, I see the benefit to it. It's just a matter of like trying to create a concise message that like the masses are going to understand what it actually is, because one of the things that Dre, he calls himself Dre, but Andre Ospina says all the time is basically your sport teaches, the better you get at your sport, the worse you get at being a human. And
Yes.
so
Yes.
the idea is to you have to work just as hard at being a human as you do as being at your sport. And that's kind of what we're talking about here with the FRC stuff, is that it's basically working you at the joint level so that you can be you can move better as a human, which will then give you the foundational work in order for you to amplify your sport. So the more you do that's a good way of looking at it too, now that I'm saying it out loud. The more you do your sport, the more you need to actually work on being a human, which comes down to, like we were talking about earlier, recovery. So your intensity level and the amount of hours you put into your sport, you want to try to match it as close as possible with the actual recovery part, because sports in general is human made. It's technically just, it's bad for you. Every sport it really is. It's not
Natural. Yeah, it's not natural.
It's not natural, no, it's like if you're a baseball player going in one direction, spinal rotation over and over and over and over and over again for 6-8 months out of the year, it's just not good for you. And the same thing with like pitching or tennis or like any sport, cycling on a bike.
Yeah. Any
of
sort of
those
repetitive stuff.
motions is just not really good for you. It's good for you mentally. It's good for you physiologically. Yeah, there's a lot of hormonal things. Yeah, it feels good. I get it, because like I said, I'm into jiu-jitsu, so I get it. It's just that you also got to kind of approach it like, understand that the more you get into your sport, the less you are a functional human. And so you got to work on that functionality in order for you to like have everyday life. Otherwise, we go back to what we said earlier, in 10, 15, 20 years, you're going to be really good at your sport, but then you're going to be really shitty as a human. And then I see people, not even exaggerating, I've seen some of the top black belts in the world where the person can strangle you to death, but they can barely walk. Like you see them walking from mat to mat, and you're like, Jesus, like that's not good, dude. That one of the reasons why I started this whole wellness for jiu-jitsu thing, because it's like I love the sport so much that like it bothered me, like, man, like I don't want to be like that, and I don't want anybody else to be like that. Like if everybody else loves the sport like I do, like, I mean, I paid mad respect to that black belt that I saw. He really is one of the top black belts in the world. But the guy literally was limping from one mat to the next.
Wow.
You know what I mean? And it's like, why would you want to live like that when you're 40, 50, or 60 years old? You're going to be in such discomfort that you're not going to be able to enjoy the jiu-jitsu at that age either, because you can't even get to the car, which is what we're hopefully we're trying to teach to the sport world. You're obviously focused on hockey. I'm focused on jiu-jitsu. You also do the masses. I do the masses as well. Yeah, man, that's why I'm into it, because when I see that, it's like, oh my God, like what? The guy can barely walk. I'm afraid of the guy. The guy could strangle me in 2 seconds, but the guy can walk over to me and say hello.
You can just walk. You can just run away.
Exactly. Exactly, bro.
But I think why we're so passionate about mobility, because we see the benefit ourselves. Like during this quarantine, we've been doing movement culture. We do classes every day at 5:30 to 6, completely free. We're just trying. Our ultimate goal is to educate people. One of the biggest things that we use in all our classes is irradiation, full body tension control.
Yeah.
And that's definitely something that practice on a regular can benefit in everything we do, because it teaches you how to engage the whole body. And engaging the whole body is not easy, because it requires a lot of mental capacity.
Yeah. With irradiation too, there's also one of the things that there's a brown belt in jiu-jitsu. She's a Ken Stretch, and I'm sure you know who she is. Christine Marie, Coach Christine.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, she's a brown belt, and she talks about how learning how to irradiate is actually beneficial for submissions in jiu-jitsu.
Yeah.
What happens is if you go 100%, like you don't know what it is, but if you're going for like a triangle and you're doing to basically strangle the person with your legs, and when you do 100% effort on it, you can only maintain that 100% effort for a shorter period of time compared to learning how to irradiate and how to rev up the amount of tension. So the 10%, the 20%, the 30%, and you do like a snake. You basically slowly constrict the blood going to the brain, and then the person is going to tap or pass out, which either one is fine for us in the jiu-jitsu world. And so learning that little skill is good for submissions. One thing that I've been learning now because of FRC is the diaphragm breathing. The diaphragmic breathing, but it's been like, I mean, night and day for me, because I was doing yoga before. So I'm pretty, for a big guy, because I'm like 200 pounds, I'm a little under 6 foot. I'm like a 5'10" and a half, 5'11". I got pretty decent flexibility, but there was times that I wasn't able to perform some of the jiu-jitsu moves. And I was thinking it was my flexibility. So I kind of kept going like hard on flexibility. But now I'm realizing a lot of it is just learning how to access the flexibility that I do have. And that comes from basically diaphragmic and centering my core and creating that irradiation from the diaphragm. And then it allows my hip joint and my shoulder joints and my spine to move more independently, which will then in turn allow me to do like the fancy inversions and stuff like that. And I didn't associate the two. I was thinking that the lack of more, I guess you could say it's mobility, because you are trying to be mobile. The lack of mobility was lack of flexibility in, let's say, my hamstring or my lower back or my upper back. And it really kind of wasn't. It was just me learning how to center myself and diaphragm myself so that I can access that flexibility. Even though, of course, I can always get more mobile. But it's just amazing to me on how something so simple that isn't taught. You know, I've been doing the fitness industry now for like a really long time, and they teach you, tighten up the core. Really? Like, really? It should be the core. Like, tighten up the diaphragm, and the diaphragm will then get everything else engaged. But no one really teaches it that way. Everyone teaches it like, oh, and then I used to do it. When I would think it, I would think like crunch. I would think spinal flexion. I would think crunch. And then that would be the actual holding the core strong. Meanwhile, I wasn't really doing anything for myself other than overworking muscles that didn't need to be overworked. And I created like an instability in my own hip girdle, which now that I'm older is more in the forefront because my body doesn't ignore pain the way it used to when I was younger. So yeah, man, it's the irradiation, the diaphragm breathing, the actual individual joints is really what it's going to kind of benefit not only just the jiu-jitsu community. I think everybody. I think everyday life as well as anybody that does a sport. Cool,
well, brother. In terms of diaphragmatic contraction, here's the thing: we're not using a diaphragm; we're going to use a low back.
Okay.
It's either one, right? Protagonist and antagonist muscle. So, you know, no wonder some people have low back stiffness because they're not activating the core or the diaphragm. And just lastly, just touch upon mobility. We talk about mobility training in terms of for jiu-jitsu athletes. One thing that we want to look at is probably how functional your mobility training is. That's one thing with that. So things like, you know, what does functional mean? Meaning that when you're doing your recovery work or your mobility work, can it carry over to a real match scenario? Right. So in things like in FRC, we go through end range training where, you know, we get simply someone to hug. For example, you talk about the diaphragmatic contraction. One exercise we do is when we get someone to, you know, grab onto something or a dummy and squeeze it as hard as you can in your whatever lock you got to do and work on that diaphragmatic contraction. That is functional. Because you sitting there and just doing diaphragmatic contraction may not be as functional, because in a real match, you're not just going to sit there and breathe. You're going to put someone in the lock and breathe.
Interesting. Right? That's a good way of doing it. So basically try to couple the recovery like exercises directly in relation to what you might actually implement in a match. So like you said, a dummy or whatever it may be, and then you mimic actual what might actually happen in a match, and then do the the exercises or the regimen.
Yeah. I was watching a fellow FRC practitioner video, and he mentioned how the muscle is just a byproduct of working out. However, your body will remember movement. So I'm like, whoa, so that hit a light bulb? I'm like, yeah, that's so true. So if we practice the same movement over and over again, your body's gonna remember that, and it's gonna be second nature. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
Right?
Interesting. Cool, brother.
Yeah, so I think that's one way you can also deliver some of the mobility stuff is how does it carry over to a real match scenario?
Nice.
Yeah.
Cool, brother. How do people find you, man?
Yeah, so you can catch us on Instagram at the Movement Culture Official.
Okay.
I can also I can send it to you as well. You can put it somewhere in the video or in the description. You can also find us on Facebook, and where our website is also themovementculture.ca.
Okay.
Yeah. So here, let me send it to you in the chat. Actually, it is a bit confusing sometimes. Yeah. So it's actually Movement Culture Official.
Cool.
Same thing on Facebook and Instagram.
All right, guys. Thanks for tuning in. Obviously, find this guy, follow him. Right now, he's doing like a Monday through Friday, 5:30 p.m. right, Eastern Standard Time.
EST, yes.
Complimentary classes online through Instagram, I believe, and I think he does
Zoom.
Oh, okay, Zoom. Sorry,
yes.
My apologies. He does it through Zoom, and it's a combination of like Ken Stretch to I think you do kettlebell work and things like that, right?
Yes, and some movement stuff.
I mean, you can't beat the price. It's the only four-letter word that everybody fucking likes is free, FREE. So you can't beat that. Obviously, if you're in Canada, go see him in person. I'm not sure where in Canada you're at. In the meantime, hit him up online. If there's any other questions, you can also hit me up. And we're all here to help each other out, man. We're not here to put anybody other than forward into our sport. And it's great that all of our FRC guys and everybody in the fitness industry is here to kind of help each other out so that we can kind of build each other an online presence, because we truly believe, he believes it, I believe it, we all believe that we can get better at our sport with less pain and longer longevity into our sport. Thanks a lot, guys.